Is it unrealistic to expect Georgia to just run the table in the SEC now that Nick Saban has stepped down? He's retiring, no longer the coach of Alabama. And let's face it, Alabama's been in Georgia's way. All right, we can look through the history. I kind of want to do a whole separate video about that. But let's just say, Alabama does take a minor step back, which I would be a little surprised if they don't. Like, if Alabama just goes undefeated in the regular season next year after a switch like this, I'd be a little surprised, right? I mean, I just think that that's common sense. But look, other programs in the SEC are on the rise, and Georgia obviously has been on this uptick since Kirby Smart has been hired. Obviously, it feels like there's been a changing of the guard. It feels like there has been a transition of dynasties. No, Georgia hasn't quite built a dynasty yet, but it's not far off. It's not far off. 2 national championships this 2020 decade so far, the 2020 decade so far for Georgia, and everything that Georgia has done in the last 7 years has been absolutely impressive, and it has been while Alabama has slowly not dominated as much. So it feels like there's been a changing of the guard. Should we expect Georgia to just run the table the way that the Alabama Crimson Tide did the last decade plus? That's my question. And I don't think it's completely unrealistic is my answer. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here, talking about expectations for Georgia's dominance, right, of the conference without Nick Saban, right? So this Alabama will not be the same. You are removing the GOAT from a situation. Do I expect Alabama to take a step back? Yes. I don't think it'll be gigantic. This should still be one of the best football programs out there, right? I still believe that this Alabama program is a top 10, whatever. It's up there when you remove Nick Saban. The jury's out on what Kalen DeBoer can do in Tuscaloosa, but he's, at the very minimum, a very good coach that wins everywhere he goes, for the most part, right? There are other programs on the rise, namely LSU and Texas when we talk about the SEC. Yes, Texas is now an SEC team, and they're on the schedule, and we have moved on. We're in the new world of college football. We already were, but now we definitely are. 24 is here. Texas is in the SEC. Steve Sarkisian is I'm not going to say they're back, but he's bringing Texas back to what they want to be, which is a very prominent football program. Hey, there's a reason why Steve Sarkisian didn't leave Texas for Alabama. That's a hell of a job. And they just made the college football playoff. They just beat Alabama. And now Saban's out of the way. One of the biggest differesses moving forward in the conference. What is a part of where Georgia's success came from in the conference? Wasn't in the West, right? I think obviously the East was definitely weaker than the West. You didn't have to play Alabama in the regular season every single year. You didn't have to play LSU, almost whoever you feel is stronger. But let's not act like the West wasn't stronger than the East from top to bottom. Those are gone. So now you're going to have to play more tough games. You're going to have to play Texas. You're going to have to play. I mean, I've got the schedules pulled up for Georgia. You're going to have to go to Bama, go to Texas, go to Ole Miss, in addition to playing the Tennessees and the Auburns and the Floridas and the Kentuckys of the world, right? Now, Florida, I don't know how tough they are right now, but Kentucky will be interesting moving forward, especially with this coming season. They got a couple Georgia transfers over there that should make an immediate impact when you talk about Brock Vandagriff and Jamon Dumas-Johnson. Those are starters and leaders on each side of the ball that they have added to. It's tough. It'll be tough to win in this conference because, yes, more tough games. However, there already were a ton of tough games, right? So it's not that much more significant. You got to be the 1 or the 2 in the conference to make the SEC championship. Georgia certainly can do that, and you obviously feel better. I think it's obvious. I feel stronger about Kirby Smart and Georgia and what they've built than any other program in the conference. So should they be running the table? Yes, right? I think so. I think that now that Alabama's out of the way, it should be easier to do that because getting to the SEC championship has not been a problem for Georgia. It will be interesting to see if it's going to be a problem this coming year. Look, I think Texas is going to be one of the best teams in college football next year, whether that's 2, 6, 5, 10, right? I think that the Longhorns will be up there. You return Quinn Ewers, you return a lot. You do lose a lot of production on the offensive side of the ball. They've done a good job in recruiting, and now you add Isaiah Bonds. You're adding one of the best receivers in college football to your roster. So Texas is retooling and rebuilding what they've had from this past college football playoff run. Georgia, that's something we've seen them do pretty much every year now for 6 or 7 years, retooling and rebuilding into a perennial national title contender, because let's not get it twisted. Georgia has been a true contender since 2017. What's the worst team they've had outside of 2017 should have won the national championship against Alabama. That is my point here. Georgia's been there and they've been contending. LSU, obviously you'd feel that they're a little bit on the rise with Brian Kelly, but year 2, it felt like they took a little bit of a step back from year 1, and now you lose your Heisman quarterback. Will there be some sort of drop-off there when they're losing a lot of offensive production? Let's just put it that way. LSU is losing the core of their offense in this offseason, and it's really, really hard to replace that in college football. Now, I think the Nussmeier kid as a quarterback is pretty good from what we've seen. Obviously, got to see him during the SEC championship in 2022 against Georgia when Georgia won 50-30. Jaden Daniels. I don't remember exactly why Nussmeier was in there. I think it had to do with a little bit with injury, but they let him in there and he flung it around and he did a good job. I don't really look at any other SEC program and say, hey, I think that they're going to compete long-term with Georgia. I just don't think Tennessee is moving in the right direction, right? I always talk about they're moving in the right direction. They need to be going this way, right? You want to be going this way. The thing is, if the right direction is, let's say the right direction is this way or up. Georgia has been moving like this. Tennessee is moving in the right direction, but I don't think it's quite at that rate. If you're trying to get there, I just don't let's do it this way. It just doesn't. See how that goes? I'm trying to show you graphs with my hands. You get it. Georgia's been at a faster rate of growth. That's just the easy way to put it over the course of this time. I do think Tennessee is moving that way, but they just, it'll be tough to compete on the recruiting trail, but you got to win some of these games. The thing about Texas, the thing about LSU, the thing about Oklahoma, whoever it is that you feel is going to really, really compete with Georgia for this conference, Alabama obviously is still going to be a high-profile team in this conference. Alabama's still going to win some conference championships, guys. I'm not acting like they just disappeared. But yes, I do think Georgia is best equipped to run the table. Okay? Because the other thing about it is these teams have to play Georgia. And that is the part that people, I feel like, are kind of discounting when you talk about these matchups is, hey, man, it's going to be a lot harder for Georgia. Man, they've got to go to Ole Miss, who I believe will be a really good team next year. Oh, they got to go to Texas. They got to go to Alabama. All playoff contenders, all possibly championship contenders. I don't know quite that about Ole Miss, but definitely a playoff contender. All of those teams have to play Georgia, who most people seem to think is just going to move forward and be as strong as it has been and probably be the best in the conference and the best in the country. There's that aspect to it too. What's the difference? They've got Kirby Smart. They're going after Alabama's staff and Alabama's players already. Alabama has been what's been in Georgia's way for the most part, and I just have a hard time seeing that blockade being quite as strong as it has been, right? You want to compare it to the story of the big bad wolf blowing the houses down? Well, that brick house is probably a little bit closer to straw now in terms of Alabama. That Georgia, we're talking about something that's just got to get through. I hope you liked that analogy. I just came up with that on the fly, but that's my point here is I think that it is wide open for Georgia now to dominate. Is it unrealistic for them to run the table and win the conference every single year? Yes. It just doesn't really work that way. I do think with everything new in college football, there will be a little bit more parity. There will be a little bit more evenness to it. You will see. Will you see a Missouri win the SEC? I don't know. I don't know if it'll get to be to that point to where it's not a Georgia or a Texas or an LSU or an Alabama, or Auburn has obviously had its pop years, not recently as much. I just don't know if there have been enough changes to say that Georgia's not going to just dominate. That's kind of where I'm at with the whole thing. No, I don't think it's unrealistic. And it's not unrealistic for you to sign up for a newsletter in about 15 seconds. Just go to the link down below that I'm putting in the description, put the email address in, and you've got the Dawg Post newsletter in your inbox every single day. We're providing written content on the website for you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for signing up for our newsletter ahead of time.